develop a standard, there are many ways that comes up. First of all, there must be a need, isn't it? You can't build a house when you don't want to stay, when nobody is not going to visit. You will just be wasting what? Resources. The same applies to this. Government cannot waste money to develop a standard when there is no need. Okay? It will be wastage. So we have to look at the markets, and we have to look at our different scenarios, and we see what we need so that we can bring order to this subsector. So that's why these standards come. So who initiates? Okay? It may be an issue. For example, a new petroleum product may come. Okay? You are the trader. You say, I want to import this petroleum product. Okay? Until we don't have any standard, there's no way we can verify that this product works. How does it work? What is the quality? How can it affect our vehicles and so on? So in that case, you will say, but I need a standard for this. And we shall see that the market needs the standard. So it will be initiated to work that what? Standard. In the other way, the government, for example, may put up a regulation, okay, which requires that the standards be developed in order to meet that regulation. Okay, so those are the different ways. But when you look at the stages, yes, we have initiated. There's some that are forced to prepare the drafts and so on, to do some research about that. After that, they go into a committee. The committee has different stakeholders. Of course, like if let's say it is you are looking at the environment here, okay? And you want to call a meeting where the people who can better have some say on the environment, have knowledge and so on. Of course, you will call the different stakeholders within the community that can be affected, okay? Or special knowledge in this area, isn't it? Like the way, let's say, community policing, if you want to effect it, you will interact with the different stakeholders who have influence in that aspect, like the chat with us, like LCs and so on. It's the same way we do here. We have specialists who are in this. We have people who are studying at the universities, lecturing at the universities who have researched in this. We have the dealers, the importers, filters, producers. So we consult in that committee. People give different information and knowledge, and by consensus, that is how we agree on what to put in this. So once you have reached that consensus, then this document goes out to the public. Of course, not everyone can attend the meeting. Like you see, not everyone can be called to the massacre, the data massacre. So we put this document outside there for the public to look at it and comment and give feedback. Okay? So when that feedback is received, again the committee sits to see and synthesize what has been quoted from the different stakeholders. This inquiry stage is not only for Uganda, okay? As a must, it has to be international. Because when you are buying your petroleum products, you don't buy them from Uganda, you don't import them to the West. Okay? With Saudi Arabia, with Russia, with where and with so they also must be. You can't keep them out, okay? By the World Trade Organization rules. You can't. They have to know, they also comment, they send feedback, they say this one will be a barrier, things like that. Then the committee sits and resolves by consensus what next. Then once that is done, the document is sent for approval. Okay, we have the council which approves these documents, the National Standardization Council, which sits at UNBS. You already know UNBS, isn't it? And they have to be approved and gazetted. So when they are gazetted, now they become national documents. They are legal documents. Okay? So somebody can come with it, post something, monitor and check and see if you do what. What's the gazetted, put in newspapers and so on. Okay? Application for the members. So we looked at that, like different stakeholders, consumers. Yes, when you are doing this, sometimes we don't consider consumers. No. It's even you, when you are looking at the feedback, please consider consumers. They are very important. If they are not there, your product will not. Okay? So there are different standards. You can see fuel standards, standards, the kerosene and petrol and diesel. Each one has. Even for those guys who are in the marine environment, the marine engine and so on, they have the specific ones. Then you have the lubricants, grease, oils, and so on. They have. Okay. Infrastructure, storage facilities, depots, and so on. That's an example, for example, the design of the station. You cannot, yes, you may design your station to look like the beauty of the city, isn't it? Does it the standards, the limits? Okay. What material are you using to construct this? How is the lighting? How is the electrical wiring and so on? What's the distance from that station? So those are, you see, when what you get if you don't. It is a process. Instead of investing money in other things you are paying for, it's same. I think in Masaka we have these shoes. Yes. Because not adhering to standards. Maybe fuel, it may be for the product, okay? But if you take that wrong product, that product for a long time, it will affect your vehicle. So your vehicle will start, you will start seeing these issues. Have you seen any fires somewhere? No? At least if you have not seen them in Uganda, you have seen them in Kenya, somewhere, or Tanzania, in the nearby countries. Okay? You have seen these accidents, and you start getting these accidents. Then you see, some of you, they say, not controlling the road, and you put the vehicle veers off the road and it's in your station. Okay? So some of you are having such kind of stuff. The tanks are rusting, but why? Because you cut corners when you are building these things. I wanted to use some different material that is not specified. What happens? It is costly. Okay, and the environment. Okay, how do you access the standards? UNBS, Uganda National Bureau of Standards, is the custodian standards. When you go to their websites or you call them at their free tool, they will be able to tell you how you can access these standards. Also, when you come to the ministry as a developer or as a trader, we advise you. License. Thank you, Peter. I'll first introduce myself again. My name is Isan Churi. I'm a principal petroleum officer in charge of licensing in the Ministry of Energy and Development. Morning once again. I'll be taking you through my presentation will be as follows. After the introduction, justification for licensing, I will also outline the stakeholders involved in this process of licensing facilities and operations. I will outline the application procedures for petroleum facility construction permit, completion certificate, and then petroleum operating licenses. I also tackle some other issues pertaining licensing of facilities and operators. Lastly, but not least, I will tackle the application fees applicable and the challenges you are facing when attaining this work. Ladies and gentlemen, we seek our mandate from the Petroleum Supply Act of 2004. Now this act provides for anybody intending to enter the petroleum supply chain to apply for the commissioner of petroleum supply for grant of construction permit or petroleum operating license. The same act establishes the petroleum supply department as a lead agency, licensing all intending operators of all activities within the downstream petroleum supply chain. Now, the activities which are covered under here, the downstream petroleum supply chain, they include retailing, storage, we're talking about here defined petroleum products, not crude. So those are best kind of activities under there. If you are doing wholesaling, all that is covered under downstream petroleum supply chain. Now, the same act provides for a three-stage licensing regime for petroleum facilities. Stage one is the petroleum facility construction permit. Then the next one is followed by the completion certificate. And lastly, the license which allows you to operate is the petroleum operating license. Now, to operationalize this act, we issued the regulations in 2009, and that's the petroleum supply regulations. Among others, it gives us the details of the licensing regime for petroleum facilities and operators. Ladies and gentlemen, someone would ask why we license? The obvious one is licensing the regulatory requirement. I've stated it very well that the law, the Petroleum Supply Act of 2003, requires anybody who is intending to construct a petroleum facility or deal in petroleum products is required to be issued a license. So it's a regulatory requirement that says. Licensing also helps us to monitor compliance with petroleum facility standards. My colleague did. I said it very well. How does the station look like? So when you are licensing, you look at the standards. Do you meet the standards as set by Uganda National of Standards? So if you don't meet them, then you are not licensed. If you meet them, then we issue license. So it's a yardstick to check compliance with standards. And not only facility standards, also operational standards. You have a fire extinguisher at your station. highway is doing its business or her business. Some of these are the stock requirement. Any licensing holder is supposed to maintain 10 days stock requirement at any time. So if you're running a station, you have to have stocks at any time, which meet the 10 days in case there are problems of supply. You are also required to submit data to the regulator. That's the Internal Supply Department. This data helps us to predict, forecast the supply situation in the country. It's also used to generate money, finance digital activities. When you are licensing, you pay some minimum fees, not to the Revenue Commissioner, but this money goes to the consolidated fund, and you are paying this money to URA. Uganda Revenue Authority, and you are issue the bank advice form so that you effect these payments. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll spend more time on these stakeholders involved in this process. There have been a number of allegations that means government is encouraging illegal stations in the country, and also the so-called mushrooming stations being involved in the country. So there are a number of stakeholders which are very key in this process. And among them, the first one is the National Physical Planning Board, which is currently under, I think, National Planning Authority. It's now a department, and after this alignment of government institutions, it was put under National Planning Authority. Now, this authority, this department currently, is involved in the zoning of this country. I'll take an example of Masaka City. When they made it to be a city, this authority must have come here and zoned this city into developmental areas. There are areas which are residential, there are areas which are commercial, there are areas which are industrial. So the sense is, you can't develop a residential into a commercial area. So they provide a guide in when we are doing developments. So this is very key to this process. So stations are supposed to be in commercial areas. They are not supposed to be in residential areas, unless you apply for change of land use. That's also that authority is offered, is given by the Department of National Physical Planning. Change of land use. In fact, I've seen some people applying for construction